Yes.
Sure. I wanted to ask you about Yemen and the Secretary General's stop in Kuwait. Obviously, the talks have now been suspended, and I wanted to know and there's talk, I mean, I wanted to know, is the UN aware of talks continuing outside of the UN process between the Saudis and the Houthis? And are they aware of reported airstrikes by the Saudi-led coalition, even as Mr. Ben was in Kuwait, that killed up to 7 civilians?
Well, regarding the air operations and the violence, we of course have spoken out about the violence in Yemen. The Secretary General and his Special Envoy Ismail ul-Sheikh Ahmed have weighed in against the continuation of such attacks. And as you know, we've been pleading for the parties to respect the cessation of hostilities, and we continue to do so. Regarding the talks, I don't have any suspension of talks to inform you about. At this stage, the Special Envoy, Mr. ul-Sheikh Ahmed, continues his work with the various parties and will continue to provide updates as we get them from him.
I think both sides have been quoted by wire services as saying it's suspended until mid-July.
We're aware of what the parties are saying. Like I said,
Okay.
from Mr. ul-Sheikh Ahmed's standpoint, he is continuing with his work. If there's anything further to say from his end, we'll share that with you. But he has continued to meet at various levels with parties, and he will continue to do that. There's a lot of work that can be done outside of face-to-face talks by the leaders of the delegations. And as you know, the Secretary General himself met the leaders of the delegations just yesterday. So he himself has also continued with those efforts and urged them to continue to meet with each other and be willing to make concessions in the interests of the Yemeni people. Yeah, have another
Sure.
one.
WOW, which is South Sudan, Burundi, and something else. On WOW, I mean, I heard initially as the Secretary General praised the response, then the mission issued a statement clarifying that the gates hadn't been opened. Some people are saying there are many, people were killed. What's the estimate, and how is there a new policy on the UN's part, given, I guess, Malakal and other things, to not open the gates? It seemed to many people strange to say we're protecting civilians by shutting the gates.
It's not by shutting the gates. There will be an evaluation of the situation. If there's a need to open the gates, that will happen. Like I just said, if the situation deteriorates further, that would be one of the steps that could be considered. But it's not the first resort. The first resort at this point is to have a site adjacent to the protection of a site adjacent to the military base, where we can protect people there. And at this stage, we have, I believe, 963 military personnel deployed in WOW, and 90 additional troops have been sent as reinforcements, with 60 more ready to move now, subject to flight clearance. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people available there, as well as people who will be trying to augment the forces existing. We have a protection of civilian site that's been operational in WOW since December 2013. There's currently, I believe, 219 displaced people sheltered at that site. But meanwhile, we have, like I said, thousands more people, basically 12,000 people being protected in an adjacent area where a security cordon has been established.
But the opposition to the Salva Kiir government they've come up with a figure of 400, which other people say is too high. Actual people killed. What's your estimate? What's the unmissed estimate of people killed in WOW?
We don't have an estimate of people killed. What we're trying to do is conduct active patrolling in WOW. The unmissed personnel are trying, to the extent possible, to deter any violence against civilians, and we're engaging with parties in order for them to return to dialogue. It's difficult to get a handle on how many people have been killed over the violence. We have made it very clear that that's the responsibility of the parties, and they need to halt all the violence and once again return in good faith to dealing with each other in all areas. Are there any other questions? Do you have a question, or are you just sort of wandering around at the periphery? Yes, yeah, I'm asking you, because otherwise it's just really one person asking questions.
Oh, in fact, I want to ask you a question about the visit of Adam and King to...
Something on Burundi, and then on this Andrew Gilmore announcement you made Friday. In Burundi, there people are saying that there's been a deployment where is being a deployment of army soldiers from certain units into eastern DRC to hunt down perceived opponents or putschists. And given this, and given that MONUSCO is there, is MONUSCO aware of any deployment by Burundian military to conduct operations with FARDC in eastern Congo?
I'm not aware of anything from that. I'll check with MONUSCO whether they've seen anything more recent, but I'm not aware of any incursions by Burundian troops.
But with it, I mean, it may be at the invitation of the government. Would
Well,
MONUSCO be
if it's
informed of that?
if it's at the invitation of the government, you also need to check with the government of the DRC.
No, I know.
It's ultimately that's with them to answer. I can see what information MONUSCO has,
Okay.
but for that you really do need the DRC government's information. Yeah. Yes.
Sure, and you'd mentioned this, that Mr. Simonovich will be replaced by Andrew Gilmore.
Yeah.
Since then, I've heard from a number, I guess I want to just ask factually, what was the recruitment, was a call put out for an ASG post? Because people in G77 are saying there was no call, and there's some pushback to it, and also some people that work in the human rights at D2 and other levels are saying they couldn't apply. Isn't it the norm for an ASG post to write a letter to member states and saying send in names and do interviews, or was that done or not done?
As far as I'm aware, the standard process for filling that post was followed, as with all senior posts.
I guess can you check on that, because then maybe these people are ill-informed, but they seem to think that didn't take place.
Like I said, as far as I'm apprised of the process, it was filled in the standard way of previous posts with a short list of candidates and interviews and so forth.
But is it the norm to inform member states that an ASG post is becoming empty and for them to write in if they have a candidate?
It ultimately things depend on the level, but I believe that all the appropriate policies for that post were filled. Have a good afternoon, everyone.